Have you ever heard of Terry Crews? As a former NFL player and actor, many have. What many may or may not know is that in 2017, Crews spoke on Twitter about how he had been sexually assaulted by Adam Benit at a party the previous year. With the rise of the Me Too movement meant to help people with trauma from sexual assault and harassment, Crews shared his story. Unfortunately, many people were not focused on the fact that Benit had assaulted him, but were instead focused on why he didn't fight back. In the 2019 article, Expendables for Whom? Terry Crews and the Erasure of Black Male Victims of Sexual Assault and Rape, Tommy J. Curry analyzed this example of victim blaming with many other points. The article came from the Women's Studies and Communication Journal and looks at what the Me Too movement was founded on, as well as how men can be harmed by the stereotypes and stigma surrounding them in sexual assault. Curry's article looks at these issues through the lens of how Me Too started and how that has evolved into our current ideas concerning sexual harassment and assault in the United States. As I will explain in my presentation, Tommy J. Curry's article, Expendables for Whom? Terry Crews in the Erasure of Black Male Victims of Sexual Assault and Rape, demonstrates how Crews was accepted into the Me Too movement because he was hurt by a man and not because he was a victim, the founding beliefs of the Me Too movement, and how harmful stereotypes of black men portray them as villains instead of victims. To start, here's some information about the Me Too movement. The movement began in 2006 with a woman named Tarana Burke who wanted to get support for victims of sexual assault. As stated by Curry in 2019 about Burke, as she stated in her TED Women Talk, Me Too is a movement about the 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys who are sexually abused every year and who carry those wounds into adulthood. Burke, 2018. Recognizing male victims of sexual violence is central to Burke's vision of Me Too, even though she believes that such recognition runs counter to Me Too as currently conceptualized. This quote demonstrates that at the core of Me Too, there is a call for help for all victims of sexual violence, not just women, and that the movement has changed to focus on men solely as perpetrators. Recognizing men as victims of sexual assault is central to the idea that all victims deserve help, but now Me Too makes that hard to do. Now that we know some information about Me Too, let's look at how Curry applied that to Terry Crews. Due to the way that sexual assault is framed today, black men and men in general are often not seen as victims. This leads to victim blaming of men, and as Curry in 2019 described, male victims of sexual assault are told to ignore it, give it a pass, or interpret their assault as nothing more than a different interpretation or misguided intention of their harasser. This dismissal of men who have been sexually abused makes it hard for men to come forward. When Terry Crews was sexually assaulted, many people asked why he didn't fight back against Benit. As a former NFL player, he was strong enough. His strength can be seen in this clip from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where Crews' character carries his coworker down a football field past the other team. While Crews had the strength to fight off his assaulter, he could not because doing so would have made him the villain. As told by Curry in 2019, Crews has been very clear to the public that he understood himself to be powerless when Benit sexually assaulted him. Crews' experience of sexual assault, specifically his inability to defend himself from the sexual aggression of Benit, was communicated as an effect of the fear others have of his black male body. The exclusion of black men in the Me Too movement as victims led Crews to add to the idea that men are mainly perpetrators of sexual assault. This may be true in many cases, but in Crews' case, he was a victim who only gained support because he was hurt by a man. There is not much discussion of male victims, just male abusers in the United States, and this adds to the villainization of men. In his article, Curry 2019 states, because men are viewed primarily as perpetrators of violence and abuse, they are rarely understood to be victims and consequently can never be the leading subject of conversations about rape, sexual harassment, or sexual victimization. This all leads to men as victims being ignored and the idea that only men cause sexual violence. Lastly, Curry described how as a culture, our culture has hurt black men as a demographic. In 2019, Curry stated, "For more than a century, racist caricatures of hypersexuality, deviance, and danger have obscured black men's sexual victimization and rape. This illustrates how dangerous stereotypes of black men have resulted in the public ignoring black male victims of sexual violence." In 2019, Curry also showed the seriousness of black male sexual assault with the quote, Among racially diverse groups of men, young Black males experience statutory rape, sexual coercion, and sexual manipulation more than other groups. Curry suggested a few things we can do to shift our focus away from Black males only being villains. This included needing to focus on the vulnerability of Black males to sexual violence and how this experience of trauma influences the attitudes and behaviors of this group, Curry 2019, and moving beyond the focus of the sex/gender of the perpetrator to an understanding of the dangers confronting the victims, Curry 2019. Curry suggested that to battle sexual assault, we need to stop blaming Black men and look at who victims are and what can be done to help them. Curry's analysis of the Me Too movement and sexual assault is important to keep in mind moving forward, as it shows that as a society we do not help all victims due to their gender and race, and we have moved past what Me Too was meant to be. We need to work to bring Black men into the conversation about sexual violence in the United States as more than just perpetrators.